Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into Allied Energy Corporation today. We've got their 2025 Outlook report. So we're going to see what they've got planned. What do you say we just jump right in?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay, so like right off the bat, the thing that really stood out to me was this whole Texas expansion, right? They're
Right.
going big in Texas.
Yeah.
They're talking about expanding that Thiel site, adding more generators, and by, late next year, they're projecting something like 3 to 3.5 megawatts of capacity at that site. It's a lot.
Yeah. No, it's definitely significant, and I think it's a smart move on their part. Texas is kind of the energy capital of the U.S. right now. They're leading the nation in both oil and natural gas production.
It's true. When you think energy, you think Texas. I guess it makes sense they'd want to be there.
Right. And it's not just about the resources themselves, but also the business environment in Texas is really favorable for energy companies.
In what way?
Well, they've got a deregulated energy market, which means there's more competition. But that also means there's more opportunity for a company like Allied to carve out their niche.
So they're not just following the crowd, they're strategically picking a place where they can really stand out. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see that strategic thinking in how they're approaching this Thiel site expansion. They're not just throwing up a bunch of generators. They're really focused on efficiency, too. Like they're emphasizing how they're going to take advantage of Texas's low electricity rates.
Oh, right. They mentioned that, yeah, it was something like, what, 8.73 cents per kilowatt hour on average?
Yeah, something like that, which is, pretty competitive.
Yeah, I mean, lower costs for them, obviously, but then that could also translate into, better returns for investors down the line.
Exactly. But it's not just about being in the right place. You also got to do things the right way. And that brings us to their Gilmer lease, where they're really focusing on getting the most out of what they already have.
Okay, yeah. This is the part where they were talking about upgrading all those pump jacks, right? I think it was like 116 of them they were going to switch out for these new, smaller, more energy-efficient models. Um, what's the big deal with that? Like, why is that so important?
Well, think of it this way. Those pump jacks are the workhorses of an oil well. They're constantly running 20/47, and the old models were real energy hogs. These new ones are supposed to use something like 30% less energy.
Wow, okay, that's significant.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I mean, for Allied, it means lower operating costs and, a smaller environmental footprint as well.
Yeah, I see. Less energy wasted basically means they can put more resources into finding more resources, right?
Precisely. But there's another interesting wrinkle with this Gilmer lease. They've installed what's called a packer in one of their wells.
Oh, okay. I gotta admit, I'm not totally up on my oil well terminology. What's a packer?
It's basically like a plug that they put down into the well bore, and it allows them to isolate specific zones and target different formations. So in this case, they're going after the Caddo formation, which is known to have pretty good oil reserves.
Ah, so it's like they're being more precise with their drilling, making sure they're hitting those sweet spots.
Exactly. And they're even hinting at the possibility of tapping into the Strawn formation as well. Now, the Strawn is interesting because it's a bit deeper, and it hasn't been as extensively explored in this area.
Okay. So more potential, but also more risk.
Yeah, that's the energy business in a nutshell.
Oh.
But I think what's interesting here is that Allied is showing that they're willing to take some calculated risks, but they're also being smart about it. They're being strategic in how they operate.
So it's like finding that balance, right? Like between old school, like wildcatting and a more modern kind of data-driven approach.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. And that seems to be kind of a theme with a lot of their activities. Take their partnerships, for example. They've got this green lease project going on with Petroloro and ORO Energy.
Yeah, that one caught my eye too. It's a little vague on the details though, right?
They are, yeah. They're keeping their cards close to their chest on that one.
Sounds promising though, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the fact that they're collaborating with other companies suggests they're open to, sharing expertise, sharing resources.
Pooling their knowledge a little bit.
Exactly. And, maybe even spreading the risk a little bit too.
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side, you've got the Interhash and Sloan project. It seems like things haven't gone quite as smoothly there.
Oh, right. This is where the little bit of drama comes in, right?
A little bit, yeah. Seems they've hit a snag with some delayed payments.
Oh, yeah. That'll always throw a wrench in the works.
It will.
Yeah.
But it sounds like they're still optimistic about eventually seeing returns from that project.
Okay. So delayed, not dead.
Right. But, it's a good reminder that even the best laid plans can sometimes run into these unforeseen obstacles.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's true for any business, really. Speaking of plans not quite working out as hoped, though, there's also the whole situation with Energix. They decided to just part ways on that partnership.
Yeah. And that was a pretty decisive move on their part. They basically said, look, this isn't working out the way we hoped, so we're moving on.
Wow. Takes guts to walk away from a deal, especially when you've already invested, time and resources into it.
It does. But it also shows they're not afraid to make tough choices,
Mm-hmm.
to prioritize what they see as their best opportunities. And, that brings us to another important point. Allied isn't putting all their eggs in the oil basket.
Right. They're looking into natural gas resources too, and potential expansion opportunities in that area. So it's like they're hedging their bets a bit, right? Diversifying their portfolio.
Exactly. And that's a smart move in a world where, the future of energy is still very much up in the air.
For sure. Nobody knows what's coming next. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've seen Allied making some pretty bold moves in Texas. We see they're really focused on efficiency. They're forming these strategic partnerships. And they're not shying away from, making some tough decisions about which projects to pursue and which ones to let go.
And all of that paints a picture of a company that's trying to position itself for success, especially in an industry that's changing so rapidly.
But the big question is it enough? Are they truly setting themselves up for long-term success? I guess we'll have to keep digging to find out. It's interesting, this whole branching out thing, like not just oil, especially with all this talk about renewables and the future of energy and all that. Like, how does that factor in? Like, what do you think Allied's thinking?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, their report doesn't really give us a clear answer.
Yeah.
But I do think this move into natural gas at least shows that they're aware of things.
Right, yeah.
They're not completely ignoring the way the wind's blowing, so to speak.
Yeah, makes sense. It's like natural gas. I feel like people see that as kind of like a bridge, right?
Yeah.
Between the fossil fuels and the renewables.
Exactly. It's, cleaner burning than coal or oil.
Yeah.
So it's a way to, at least in the short term, reduce those emissions while still meeting those energy demands.
So maybe they're trying to appeal to those investors who are, maybe a little more environmentally conscious.
Is it possible?
Yeah.
Could also just be them, giving themselves some flexibility in market.
Yeah.
If oil starts to decline, they've got that foothold, right, in the natural gas sector.
Yeah, keeps their options open. Always a good thing in a crazy industry like this. Always got to be ready for anything.
Absolutely. Speaking of things being a little crazy, did you notice that thing about the SWD lease?
Oh, right. The saltwater disposal, yeah.
Yeah. They secured a new one, and they're exploring those new drilling locations.
Right. Shows they're thinking ahead.
Exactly. They're not just sitting on their hands. They want to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, you need to manage that salt water.
Okay, so back up a sec. Why is the SWDD lease so important?
Well, when you drill for oil, you don't just get oil, right? There's a lot of salt water mixed in with it.
Oh, right, of course. So they need a place to, get rid of it.
Safely and responsibly, yeah. That's where the SWD lease comes in. They can inject that salt water deep underground, away from freshwater sources and all that.
Okay, so it's not just about, finding the oil. It's all the other stuff that comes with it.
Yep. You got to manage the whole process. And this is actually where I think Allied's doing some really interesting things. They've partnered with Miller ESP. They specialize in these artificial lift systems.
Artificial lifts, what are those?
So basically, these systems help extract oil and gas from wells that are starting to lose pressure.
Ah, okay. So they're getting more out of those wells.
Exactly. More efficient, less impactful than drilling brand new ones.
And working with experts, right?
Right. They're investing in the latest tech to really optimize how they do things. And that, to me, says a lot about their approach.
It's like they're thinking about all the angles.
Trying to cover all their bases.
Yeah.
From exploration, production, environmental stuff, technology.
Yeah.
It's impressive. They're not just reacting, They're trying to shape things.
But it's still a tough business, right? What are some of the hurdles, maybe, the challenges that they might be up against?
Well, I mean, you can't ignore the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah.
Renewables.
Yeah.
The world's moving that way. And if that keeps going, how does that impact a company like Allied? That's a big one.
Right. They've got that natural gas thing going, but is that enough?
That's the question. And then, there's always the regulations.
Oh, right. Yeah. That could change everything.
Absolutely. Environmental regs, anything like that could really throw a wrench in things.
So a lot of uncertainty, but also a lot of potential, right?
Yeah. It's a bit of a tightrope walk. You got to be really skilled to keep your balance.
That's a great way to put it. It's like we're watching this business drama play out in real time.
Totally. We don't know how it's going to end.
Yeah.
But, man, it's fascinating to watch. Allied is definitely a company to keep an eye on.
For sure. Before we go any further though, let's just take a minute to like recap a little bit. We've seen their Texas expansion, their focus on efficiency, these partnerships, their willingness to like make the hard calls, right? Walk away when they need to.
Right, and they're really trying to manage that environmental impact, thinking about that saltwater disposal, working with experts to get the most out of what they have.
Yeah, it's a pretty complete picture, I'd say, of where they are and where they want to go.
For sure.
Mm.
But it also raises those questions,
Yeah.
right, about that long-term viability, especially with that shift toward clean energy. Can they keep up?
Big questions, and I guess we'll all have to wait and see. We'll keep digging in the next part. Okay, so we've talked about, like what they're doing, their money stuff, all that. But there's one thing we haven't really talked about, right?
What's that?
Like their philosophy. What kind of company is Allied trying to build? What's their like vibe?
Oh, that's interesting. That's something people don't always think about.
Yeah.
But it's important. And actually, their report does talk about their values. They talk about being careful with money, being efficient, and expanding responsibly.
Yeah, but that all kind of sounds like, typical corporate jargon.
It can. But I think with Allied, there's something to it. Look at the Energix thing, right? They were upfront about it not working out. Missed goals, lack of progress, they said it. That tells me they're serious about results.
So they're not just growing for the sake of growing. They actually care about, like, doing things right.
Yeah, it seems like it. Every move they make, it's got to fit into their big picture. And part of that, it seems like, is being careful about the environment.
Right. They're not just saying, oh, we're green, but actually doing stuff.
Right, like that Miller ESP partnership to get more oil out of those wells, less waste, and that whole saltwater thing. They're taking that seriously.
Yeah. It's a tough balance, making money, but doing it responsibly. I mean, let's be real. They're an oil and gas company, right? Can they really be like the good guys leading the way to clean energy and all that?
It's a good question. That natural gas move is a start, but, is it enough?
Yeah.
The world wants real change.
So are they stuck, like trying to do the old thing while the world wants something new?
Maybe, but I also kind of see it as them being willing to change. They're trying things, learning, not just stuck in the past.
Yeah, makes sense. The world's changing. They got to change with it.
Right. Not just riding the wave, but like paddling to stay ahead of it.
So big question time. Back to the beginning. Is Allied setting themselves up for success? It kind of sounds like maybe.
I think that's fair. They're smart, they adapt, they make tough choices.
Yeah.
But the whole industry is facing some serious questions.
Right, like is oil and gas even going to be around in the future?
Big question. Can they change fast enough to stay in the game? We'll see.
That's the real cliffhanger. But for now, I think we did a good job, right? Looking at Allied, their plans, all that.
Yeah, I think so. We dug into the numbers, how they work, their strategy, even like what kind of company they are, what they care about.
And hopefully everyone listening learned something, right? Got a better sense of what Allied's all about.
Yeah, and it's just a snapshot, right? Things are still changing. But it's good to pay attention. See what they're doing, the choices they make.
Maybe someday we'll look back and be like, we knew it all along.
That'd be something. But even if we don't have all the answers, it's still good to think about these things, right?
Absolutely. To everyone out there, keep learning. Keep asking questions.
And if you need help figuring things out, well, you know where to find us.
Until next time.